Okay, so now we'll go through the actual text. You notice there that I didn't really cite any page numbers or many specific ideas. Now, though, like I said, we're filling out the why, the because, the important details that fill in everything I just said. So, one of the first things Descartes says on page 37 is he's sticking with this narrative dramatic format. He says, man, the last few days going through these meditations have been really rough. First, I had to pretend nothing existed. Then, to make that really stick, I had to come up with this evil, malicious demon. I knew I was just pretending, but it still sort of freaked me out because it made me realize, even though there's no malicious demon, I could still be wrong about everything. Even if I'm not really dreaming right now, the dream shows me something about waking life, which is that in waking life, I don't really have a clear way to sort out what's guaranteed to be true and what's false. And he says, man, I'm shook. Okay, I scared myself. And he says, but all that hard work is starting to pay off. He says, now it's easier for me to understand that certain things are doubtful and then to just put them aside for a second. Once more, not proving it's false that you have a body, just saying, hey, I don't know if I have the tools yet to think about that with perfect clarity, so I'm going to set those thoughts aside for a second. So he says it's starting to get easier to doubt things like your vision, the belief in your body, etc. So, I want to ask you a question yet. Having gone through the Descartes, having, as I asked you to do, to try to actually doubt all these things, to try to actually understand what it would mean to maybe live in a dream your whole life, I want to ask you, are you getting better at deliberately doubting things in order to better discover their truth? So this is maybe not a question you thought of yet. So pause the recording as usual and reflect on it for a while. Do you think that you're starting to pick up the skill that Descartes is trying to show us here? Okay. Now, further down on page 37, we have something crucially important. We'll get more about it in the next meditation, but this is huge. Remember, Descartes is taking baby steps from certain idea to certain idea. And certain for him means those ideas which must absolutely be exactly true just the way they seem. Those ideas about which it's not even really possible to pretend that you don't believe them. They're not even really possible to doubt. So, think about what all he said so far. Has he shown you that it's impossible to doubt that you have a body? No, he has not. Has he disproven this hypothesis of the malicious demon? Has he shown you that it's impossible that you live in the matrix or that he lives in the matrix? No. Has he proven that it's impossible to be stuck within a dream like in the movie Inception? No. He hasn't even tried to disprove those yet, because he doesn't have the right collection of baby steps, right? He hasn't built the tool he needs yet to disprove that. So a lot of people reading this forget, because he doesn't keep reminding you about the possible falsity of that, so it's easy to forget. But you can't believe something in Descartes' meditations until it's been proven clear and distinct, proven to be completely certain. He has not proven that it's certain you have a body yet. He will. And it's only on page 37 that he first proves that the malicious demon is not real. So that malicious demon that's fooling you about everything, that's harder to get around than dreams. That's harder to disprove than dreams. Here is where he proves it, and he uses his last, most recent tool, his last, most recent certain idea, in order to disprove this. So remember, the end of the third meditation, he proved that God is real because he has an idea of God, that very specific technical definition of God, omnipotence, omniscience, and eternity and time. a certain kind of perfection. And he says that idea could not have come from him. It could not have come from sensation of objects. Like, you don't get an idea of omnipotence by looking at a tree. And he says it surely must have been innately installed in him. And that idea could only come from something which itself was as powerful as the content of the idea. So in fact, it has a cause which is outside of Descartes and which is God itself. So this is what he says. He says, the hypothesis of the malicious demon implies a godlike figure deceiving me. And he says, well, I've just proved that there A is such a godlike figure, but super importantly, B, that godlike figure is perfect, all-powerful, all-knowing, etc. Here's the step forward. This next step is what proves the malicious demon to be impossible. Descartes says, based on the nature of God's existence, which I have proved, omniscience, perfection, etc., that kind of being could not be a deceiver. Let's put this in everyday terms. God is not going to sit around all day long deceiving you. Oh, haha, wouldn't it be funny? Let's see if we can get Nick to believe that 2 and 3 is 5. The yucks will never stop. Oh, let's get Jody to think that the sun is closer than it appears. Ha ha ha. Oh, maybe I'll get the archangels in on this. No. Right? But at that level, the sort of everyday thing, come on, is God really going to sit there and just like be messing with you? God's going to create a universe like the Truman Show that's completely fake and then just watch you scuttle around in it because that's hilarious or something. Okay, at an everyday level, that seems pretty silly, right? But Descartes isn't operating at an everyday level. He has to show you not just that God messing with you seems weird and unlikely, or that God messing with you seems evil and you've been told that God is not evil. He has to show as a philosopher, at least his method of philosophy, he has to show as a philosopher that it's impossible for God to do that kind of thing to you. Now that's a lot tougher. Even if you disagree with Descartes, and I've got my disagreements with him, but even if you disagree with him, you have to respect the difficulty of the ideas that he's trying to think and how dang creative he is in coming up with ways not just to say something's probably true, but coming up with just the exact right way to understand it where it seems certain. And this is what he says. He says, what does it mean to deceive? Once more, he says, let's define our terms. If we define them correctly, we'll see which ideas fit with each other and which ideas don't fit with each other. Let's define what deception is. He says deception is always a form of imperfection. Lying and deceiving always implies some lack or some problem in the deceiver that the lie or deception is meant to sort of fix. So now we can use everyday thought to plug into philosophy. Think about the last time you lied. Oh, me, it was so long ago, I don't even think I can remember it. Anyhow, think about the last time you lied. When you lied, did you lie because you had something to gain? Oh, no, to the cashier. No, those are on sale. Those are super on sale. They're half that price. Or you did something wrong and someone confronts you about it. You go, nope, like Shaggy, it wasn't me. I don't know what you're talking about. Right? Because you had something to lose. So basically, the definition of deception or lying, details aside, is that the deceiver and liar, they have something to gain or something to lose, and that's why they're lying. That is, they're trying to protect themselves, they're trying to get something they don't have, and they're trying to protect themselves from some other person. Like if you lie to the cops, it's because you're trying to protect yourself from the power they have to throw you in jail. You're trying to lie to your significant other about you've been flirting with someone else. It's because they have something, love, a home, whatever it might be, that they can take from you. Okay, and that seems to be the nature of most or all deception. So this is what he says. He says, if God is the way we've proved God must be, perfection, all-knowing, etc., when would God have to lie to you? Or what might motivate God lying to you? Would it be that God has something to gain? No, God's got everything God needs. Is it because God is scared that if God doesn't lie to you, you'll hurt God? No, go ahead and try to hurt God. You can't. So this is what Descartes says. We get the basic definition of what lying requires. It requires some imperfection in the liar. And remember, there's something that they could lose. There's something they don't have yet. I don't mean moral imperfection. I just mean there's like things they want that they don't have. There's something they want to do that they don't have control over. So lying and deception always imply some necessary imperfection in the liar or deceiver. But God, we already proved last time, you've already got this idea in your head of God, is perfect. Not imperfect, but perfect. So this is how Descartes argues that there cannot be a malicious demon, there cannot be an all-powerful deceiver, because we've shown what it means for something to be all-powerful last meditation. We've also shown that that all-powerful thing actually exists as the cause of your thinking of such a thing. And now we have shown that all-powerful is the opposite of deceiver. All-powerful equals perfect. Lying and deceiving equal imperfect. Well, if something is perfect, it therefore cannot be a deceiver, because you see how something can't be perfect and imperfect at the same time. You can't be the fastest runner on the track and the fourth fastest runner on the same track at the same time, right? So God is perfect, deceiving equals imperfection, therefore God as perfect could not ever deceive you. So now I have a question for you. It's sort of a two-part question. I want you to think like Descartes, and I want you to think like yourself. Thinking like Descartes, with the definitions of certainty, the definition of God as perfection, the definition of lying as imperfection. Just go over that argument one more time. Tell me if all the parts, like math, seem to add up correctly. Okay? So pause the recording now and think about that. The way he defined the terms, ignore whether you believe those terms yet or not, the way he defined the terms, do you think that that little argument about perfection actually gets rid of the possibility of the malicious demon? So, do you think the argument makes sense, and do you think on his terms he successfully disproved, he's shown that it's impossible that there's an all-powerful deceiver? So please pause the recording now and think about that. Second question. I want to know what you think. So, this will be a little bit tricky to describe, but I think it's what you'll naturally do anyhow. You've just read Descartes, and you've just got my explanation of what he means there. Keeping that in mind, right, not ignoring what Descartes said, but what do you think? Do you think that there's a proof available for God? Do you think that it's possible that there's still deception caused by God? And basically, if you think that God is a non-deceiver, why do you think God would be a non-deceiver? I bet a lot of you also think that God doesn't deceive, but I bet you think it for different reasons than Descartes. So, second question from your angle instead of Descartes, do you think that God is a deceiver? Do you think it's possible, impossible, likely, or unlikely that God is deceiving anyone at this moment? So pause and think about that. Once more, for some people, that idea seems really goofy, although the better you understand it, the less goofy it seems. Still, even if you don't believe it, the skill it takes to find that way to prove the things he's trying to set out to prove is actually, the cleverness of it alone is pretty astounding. So, Descartes' willing to take the next step, but he realizes, wait a second, he just showed that God is not a deceiver. He thinks he's shown that with certainty. He's also shown that God exists and that he exists, and that's it. All Descartes has proven so far, you see how slow it can go sometimes, is that Descartes exists as a thinking thing. He is essentially, or at his core, a thinking thing. He's also shown that he has different kinds of thoughts, which he's about to use, but he mentioned that in a prior meditation. Different kinds of thoughts. He's then shown that through his thought he can reveal that there is one other thing at least in the world, which is God. That's it. Now he's just shown that God is not the source of deception, mistakes, or error, because that would make God like a bully, basically, who needs attention through his bullying. It makes him weak and imperfect. No problem, we're fine with all that. Then Descartes says, oh crap. Basically, all I've shown up to this point is that God is not the source of deception. But what motivated the whole darn book? That Descartes is, in fact, deceived. That Descartes does, in fact, make mistakes, even though he's really smart. And that he does make mistakes and errors pretty regularly. So this is only in a few lines, but you have to understand he's basically created a whole new problem for himself by solving an earlier problem. He got rid of the malicious demon. Excellent. He showed that God exists. Fantastic. But now it seems that he's made it such that there would only be truth in the world, there would be no mistakes whatsoever, and that he's never told a lie, been told a lie, whatever, in his whole life. That's clearly not the case. So page 37 over to 38, he's got to figure out why. It's actually the rest of the meditation. For the rest of the meditation, he's got to figure out why, if God and him are the most certain things, and God is a non-deceiver, how come Descartes is so easily deceived? Now, you can strip the religious language out of this altogether, even though this is supposed to be philosophy, not theology, right? He's not asking you to affirm any specific passage of a specific religious text. But still, you can drop that language out of it, and you can rephrase the question significantly in this way. If human beings are rational, if we're the kinds of things that can know things, that is, if our brains, our minds, our souls have a power to know truth, how is it possible for it to be the opposite too? How can our brains, which seem designed to know the truth, how can they also make mistakes? Just a basic question is, why does rationality produce irrationality as well? Why does the truth escape us even though it seems like that's what we're good at, is making the truth? And this is what Descartes says. This is sort of wild. He says, error and mistakes are not the opposite of truth. Now just pause and think about that for a second. What would mistakes and error be, except it seems like they can only be the opposite of truth, right? There's truth and then there's a lie. There's knowing something accurately, there's making a mistake about it, right? That's how it seems. But this is what Descartes says. He says, no. When you make a mistake, when you're deceived or you make an error, it's not that you wholly 100% lack the truth. And it's certainly not the case that an error is something like a coin in your pocket that's an actual thing. This is what Descartes says. He says mistakes, errors, falsity is just a privation of the truth, Or in more standard language, mistakes are partly true, whereas the truth is totally true. It's sort of wild. Mistakes are partly true and then just missing part of the truth. So let's think about it this way. Let's bring the giraffe example back. I sort of like the giraffe. You and I are both looking at the giraffe. And somebody says, guess how much that giraffe weighs? And I look at its skinny little legs and its big old fat belly. That's a lot of neck, but it's really skinny. And I say, I think it weighs 1,200 pounds. And you look at it, you're looking at the hooves. You're like, I don't know, it's eating off the tree right now. That's going to make it weigh more. And you go, I think it weighs 1,300 pounds. And no offense, but I'm really good at this stuff. They weigh the giraffe and they say, wow, 1,200 pounds on the dot. Look at Chris. Look at him go. And I, brush my shoulders off. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Well, think about it. You made a mistake. You were wrong. You were in error, however you want to say it. But were you 100% wrong? No. You were about 10% off. If it was 1,200, you said 13. That's very close to 10% off. Okay. Which Descartes would say means you're 90% correct. Or that you had 90% of the truth, something like that. So does that make sense? Same thing. Someone comes running out of a bank. They're holding a bag with that S with a line through it, the international sign for money. They look panicked. They've got pantyhose over their face, and you think you see a gun. And you go, oh, call 911, there's been a robbery, etc. Then someone walks out of the building and says, cut, great scene. The robber comes walking back, hugs the security guard. Oh, they're actors. Now, you were incorrect about one thing, that the person was a robber. But you were correct about all sorts of other things in the same judgment, right? That someone was running. That people don't normally run unless they've got a good reason to run. That they were holding something. That they were moving away from this building, which is called a bank. That banks usually have money in them. All these things you were correct about. So to put numbers on it is sort of artificial, but I think it helps get the point across. When you saw this person, you saw money, you saw running, you saw bank, you saw the sign for dollar symbol. You were correct about every single one of those. You just then also thought you saw bank robbing. Actually, it's that you added them together and then you judged incorrectly. But so there's one part which you were wrong about, but so much that you were correct about. And Descartes says that's every error or mistake. You're right about some stuff, and some stuff you're wrong about. So this is a very abstract question, but for some of you, this is going to be the fun sort of question. Do you think that that's an accurate account of what error and falsity are? Do you think that every error or mistake is just a partial grasp of the truth? You've got some truth, but not all of it. Okay, so pause the recording and think about that. Basically, how would you define error or mistake? What makes someone wrong about something? Okay, so page 39 is where all this comes together. He refers to the things he said about God, but it's mainly about error, falsity, mistakes. And he says, let's think about what error is. It's partial truth, which means there's some truth in it and some mistake. Now he says, when you see my examples, the bank robber, the skinny neck of the giraffe, all that stuff, that's what he calls knowledge or intellect, reason sometimes. Okay? And he says you can't be wrong about that stuff. This sounds strange, but Descartes says if you think that you see a giraffe in front of you, You can't be wrong about the sensation of the giraffe. That is, it's sort of this multiple level movie. It says, you can't be wrong about the fact that you feel like you're seeing a giraffe. So even the person who's hallucinating a giraffe or, say, a pink elephant, there is no pink elephant. There's not a giraffe in the room right now. But the perception is some sort of real thing. It's electricity in their brain or a twitching of their eye or something, right? At that level, just feeling like something's happening or feeling like something is, you're not wrong about that ever. What you're wrong about is if you then judge or choose to agree with something in addition to that, where you then say, I believe that the giraffe and the pink elephant are actually in this room. That's where error shows up for the first time. So think about it this way. You've got one side, which is basic, just like sort of, you could say it's recognition or perception. And then you've basically got belief or affirmation of something on the second side. That's will, choice, or judgment is that second side, where you choose to believe something is true. So think about it this way. I say, I have in front of me a triangle. It's in pencil. It's about 3/4 of an inch on every side. It's a isosceles equilateral triangle. Okay, so all the lines and angles are the same. And I tried to make the lines straight, but they're a little bit shaky. Okay. So everything I just said, you can completely, crisply understand, right? You know what a triangle is. You totally sympathize with me that it's hard to draw perfectly straight lines. You know what a pencil is. It even makes sense that I would use a pencil to draw a triangle because it's either paintbrush, pen, or pencil, stuff like that. So everything about what I said is completely comprehensible and you can think the idea. Now I'm going to ask you to use your will or judgment or choice. Do you think there actually is one? Do you believe the words I just said? So once more, when I first said it, you could maybe picture it in your mind's eye. You understand the word triangle. You understand pencil. You know that pencils can make triangles, right? That's one of the things they can do. You know what a triangle with 3 equal sides and 3 equal angles is going to look like, right? All that's perfectly comprehensible. But then I ask you to add a second step, a second level, and say, do you believe that there is such a triangle or not? See how it's different? First of all, it should just feel different in your head. When I describe it, you probably actually picture a triangle, but it's pictured sort of in your third eye, right? It's pictured in your mind. Then I say, do you believe that there actually is such a triangle in front of your professor at this very moment? Now that should feel like a different sort of inner mental operation. But here's once more the way that we can show that they're different. Actually, I really do want to know if you believe that I have a triangle like that in front of me right now. So some of you will say no, you don't believe there's such a triangle. Some of you will say yes. But for those of you who say no, there is no such triangle, you still understand all the things I said, right? So you say the triangle is false. I will or choose or judge that there is no such triangle. And yet you still understand everything that I said before. And those of you who affirm and judge that, yes, I choose to believe that there is in fact such a triangle in front of Professor Chris, you also retain the same exact knowledge or reason or perception of the words that I said. So you see how, since it can go both ways in judgment, it's got to be something different than the unified single comprehension of it that everyone shares in common. And like I said, at a sort of an experiential level, personal experience, don't you feel like there's the first understanding of it, and then there's, well, Did he really draw a triangle? And that you go through that stuff at a second step. That's what Descartes says, and that's right the middle of 39. He says, when I look into making mistakes, I find two concurrent, that is, simultaneous causes. Namely, first, the faculty of knowledge. Second, the faculty of choice or freedom of the will. That is, mistakes depend on first the intellect or knowledge, and then the will. And he says, intellect or knowledge, just the understanding of what triangle means, what pencil means, etc. There's never really any mistake in that part. It's that second step where you go, I think all professors are jerks. I bet he's lying. That's when you can introduce the mistake. So, can you see from what I gave you the context before what the next step is going to be? I'm not going to summarize all the context, but one of the things I said before, the sort of package deal for what today is that Descartes was going to show you a method for avoiding error, never making mistake, and so only having clear and distinct, totally certain, perfectly true ideas. This is one of the other ways philosophy works, is once you've got a certain set of ideas stated by someone, if you add those ideas together, there's certain new ideas you're going to get out of those. Just like if I give you the number 2 and 4 and 10. Okay, there's 2 boxes, there's 4 chairs, there's 6 couches. I give those to you, they're in the room, we count them, right? Then I say, well, how many things did I just give you? And you go 2, 4, 10, yeah, there's 16. If given 2, 4, and 6, if 2, 4, and 6 are true, 16 is just the next natural step, right? One of the things that philosophy will help you do is stay one step ahead of everybody else. Because philosophy always does this. It says, I'm going to argue that 2 is true. Okay, we all agree on that. Okay, next I'm going to argue that 4 is true. There's 4 chairs. Okay, everyone agrees with me. There's 2 boxes and 4 chairs. We all agree. Okay, come to this side of the room. 6 couches. Do you see them? Okay, we all agree on the 6 couches. Then philosophy says, what's next? Philosophy says, okay, reader, now you do some work on your own. The author or the professor steps back for a second and says, you figure it out. What's the next step? And if you think about it, you'll go, 16, right? There's 16 things in this room. You will be one step ahead of the crowd because when people give you certain factual information, you will be good at adding it up and seeing what other new ideas are what's called implied within the ideas you've been given. Implied literally means folded within. Pli is French and I believe Latin originally, but pli is French for fold. Im means, inside is one of the things it means. So if I give you 2, 4, and 6, implied in that, at least one idea implied is that in that, 2, 4, and 10 is what I meant to say. If I give you 2, 4, and 10, implied within that is 16. I feel like I've been saying the numbers wrong now. I meant to stick with what I said the first time. 2 boxes, 4 chairs, 6 couches, okay? That's one of the ways I said it. That would be 12 things. Okay, I've sort of botched the numbers. Okay, well that's a little embarrassing. Hopefully my mixing up of numbers didn't confuse the point. The point is that philosophers, while not always very good at math, are good about seeing that if there's a certain series of true ideas together, they find ways to add those ideas to each other and get new ideas that nobody had ever told them. To add new ideas and see what the implications of what has been given is, to figure out things that not everyone else knows already. So that said, I told you where Descartes was heading today, a method for preventing all errors, all mistakes. I've just showed you that mistakes require 2 different steps. Mistakes require both perception and will or judgment, willing to say, I believe that's true, willing to say, I believe that's false. So, how are those dots going to be connected? How will you add those things together to get what I told you the final result is? You can't help but see stuff when your eyes are open. You can't help but think of a triangle when I say the word triangle. But you can always not take the second step. You can always not use your judgment or will and say, I believe or don't believe that. So, if your eyeballs are sending you a message, pink elephant, giraffe, voice of your professor, you can't help that. But Descartes says strictly you're not wrong that there's something happening in your auditory part of your brain, that something's happening in your visual cortex. And you could even say, look, it's shaped like a giraffe. You'd be correct about all those things. It's only when you use your will or judgment to say, I choose to say that I believe that the giraffe is over there in the classroom. I choose to say that I believe that the pink elephant is real and is coming right for me. So if you need that second step to make a mistake, then if you don't take that second step of judging or willing, you cannot make a mistake. Because something which is necessary for a mistake, willing, you didn't supply it. If you don't supply something necessary, then that thing can't show up. So that's how we connect the dots. That's how we add up all the things Descartes said. That's your bulletproof, foolproof method for escaping error. We have to say a bit more about that. And these are the last few pages of the fourth meditation. So this is what Descartes says. Withholding your judgment means that you'll never be in error. You will never make a mistake. Because you'll never claim that something's real when it's a hallucination. You'll never claim something's a giraffe when you don't actually know the biology that well and it's some other animal. You always say, I'm not sure. All I can say is that it's a tall animal. It seems to be in front of me. My visual cortex is activating these colors, etc. But you see that you wouldn't get very far in life if that's all you did. If you stayed at the level of the third meditation and said, could be a malicious demon, I better not affirm anything as true because it could all be a deception, I guess technically you'd be never wrong, but I'm not gonna invite you to my birthday party. Because you'd never come to the house. You'd say, well, he told me the address. I think I know where that is, but could be an evil demon. I better stay home. You wouldn't be able to eat, or you at least wouldn't be able to say that you thought you were eating. It's literally an unlivable life. So what Descartes says is, he says, keep following me, because we're not done yet. I'm going to show you a few other things that are certain and true. And then what you can do is you'll have a firm basic foundation. All the stuff you need to know about your mind, about your body, about math, about other people, about God. You'll have the basics set in place. Just like if you know how to do multiplication and division and addition, when you're presented with new numbers in the future, 2,382 and 1,000,004, you've probably never been asked to add those particular numbers before in your life, but you've got the basic methods down. So then you can add those numbers together accurately. What Descartes is going to do is going to give you a few more certain ideas, and he's going to say, now you've got the basics. Now you will be able to use your will after double checking ideas for, like, does it pass the smell test? Does it seem like it might be false? And you'll be able to apply your methods or tools of clear and distinct true ideas, clearly certain ideas about which you know you must be right, and you'll apply those to day-to-day things, and you're going to be way more likely to be right about them. So he says if you refrain from using your will, you will always avoid error. But he doesn't say, so you better never use your will or judgment. You better always say, I remain in doubt. He doesn't say that. He just says, hesitate before affirming things. Don't just think something's true because someone else said it was true. Don't just think something's true because you've always thought it was true. Think for yourself. And what that means is you're going to have to think about the thoughts which you already have. You're going to have to try to pass them through this rigorous test. The ones that pass, you've given them a seal of approval, not somebody else, not your parents who told you when you were too young to think for yourself, not the media who's constantly telling you all sorts of nonsense, not your professors who might be trying to bias you towards what they think is good, but you will use your will. You will double check your own darn ideas, not somebody else's. And then you will know for sure in the future whether you can reliably believe those ideas or not. You see, it's not a coincidence that Descartes calls this the faculty of choice and of freedom. If you take ideas, whatever appears to you instantly, and affirm it, you're not actually being free, but you're being sort of like stimulus response. You know what I mean? Just input in and you say it. I got input. I believe. What Descartes is asking you to do is not to become what's called a Cartesian, which is someone who follows Descartes, is a Cartesian. He's saying, you think for yourself. You choose when to say something's true or false. You should wait until an idea is clear, then affirm it with pride and dignity. Instead, what we often do is we affirm as true everything that pops into our head. Somebody else said it, must be true. Looks like a pink elephant, sure looks dangerous. Right? Take that moment to pause before you say, I believe any particular idea. Then when you do believe it, you can have way more confidence that you're truly free in accepting what you know to be true, instead of unfree, because you didn't take the moment to choose whether to affirm it or not, but just swallowed what somebody else or the world or your deceptive eyes foisted upon you, dropped in your lap. That's it. That's our fourth meditation. Now, I've repeated a number of things today, but it's also yet another fairly complicated day. So as always, if you have questions about how God links to error and certainty, how this method proceeds from certain to certain to certain, how you can avoid mistakes every single moment of your life if you so choose, absolutely always just shoot me an email. Okay, if anything's confusing, anything you want to hear a little bit more information about, send me an email and I'll get right back to you with some more information. So that's the fourth meditation. Thank you, everyone.